Good evening, folks, and welcome to our April monthly buzz. It's wonderful to be with all of you this evening. We've got a wonderful night planned for all of you. Later on this evening, we've got Bob Binnie that's going to be with us. We've got Chari who's with us to give an update on all the education that she is doing for TBS. We've got a packed evening. So thank you for joining. It's always great to spend an hour to an hour and 15 minutes with you guys. And we've got a lot to talk about because it's spring and we have so much going on in the bees that yeah, we are just going to pack it in as hard and as fast as we possibly can. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in because tonight is going to be a little bit different in format because we have Bob Binnie on with us in jumping on in 10 or 15 minutes. I think Bob's already with us, but we'll bring him up in 10 or 15 minutes. We're going to make as much time as we possibly can for that. So Chari and I are going to do our thing kind of here at the beginning, and then we're going to reserve about an hour to do just to talk through with Bob what you need to be doing in your bees right now. And so I've got a handful of topics to discuss with Bob queued up, and then we'll certainly take some of your questions as well if we have time and as we're going along. So it's going to be a great evening. Can't wait to spend it with all of you. As we get started here, just as a reminder, if you don't have bees yet, we still have a few openings. Most of our openings are pretty full at this point, but we do have a few openings left. So check out our website and you can still buy bees if you have not already. We have decided to carry stand soft sugar bricks or to manufacture them year round. So they are such a popular product that so many people ask for constantly. Usually we in the past have just manufactured them in the late summer, fall, and winter. But we're going to start manufacturing them year around. So they will be available year round. I find that they're really helpful in the spring buildup, especially if you've got a new nook or a new package. If you give a new nook or package or split that's really just starting to grow too much liquid syrup, they can get a little bit honey bound. You can feed them faster than they can use it if they don't have a lot of brood yet. And so a sugar brick is a good I would say alternate feed. So maybe instead of feeding a gallon of syrup every week, you do a sugar brick one week and then a gallon of feed the next week to help prevent being honey bound. So Complete Bee, also highly recommend at this time of year, the complete formula. I use it in my bees constantly and see great results. And then the last quick little commercial I'm going to mention before we get to why you're really here is our bee warranty is live. So if you're buying bees from us this year, then our bee warranty is up and ready for you to purchase. It was a huge success last year. We had tons of people buy our bee warranty, and about 45% of people that bought it are using it. So they had a beehive die. And then here in a couple weeks, we'll be replacing that beehive for free that they lost last year. So it's easy to lose bees. So that's why we started our bee warranty. And just by way of reminder, if this is new to you, if you don't use the warranty, then we refund 50% of it to you. So if you do use it, of course, we'll give you a free beehive. If you don't need it and don't use it, we refund half of that money back to you. So check out the QR code or our website if you want to learn a little bit more about the bee warranty. All right, Chari, it is all you. What's going on with our education this month?
All me. That's a little scary, isn't it? Hi, everybody. Spring is here. Trees are full of leaves. I don't know where you are. I know somebody, we got somebody here from Hawaii tonight. Your trees are always full of leaves. So we all want to come live with you. That's okay, though. Hey, we got a great 5 week month for April. That means, yes, Sherry had to do a whole extra week worth of work, but that's okay. I'll get to make up for it the next month. We'll only have four. But for 5 weeks, we're going to have content that you're going to love. And one of them will point out in a minute. But starting on week one, treating versus non-treating for varroa mites, that's already out, as well as the kind of companion video about what happens will bees become resistant if you don't treat. Those are really good together, and I think you'll really like this article. Blake wrote this. It's a good article. Week two, which is going to be actually next week, the 7th, the week of the 7th, identifying and fixing a queenless hive. Oh my goodness. How many of you have ever had that happen? I can see hands going up everywhere on beekeepers. New beekeepers, it's kind of part of our little hobby. So you really want to get that read ahead of time. The video that goes with that, identifying and fixing queenless hives, it's a super great video. Week three, maximizing honey production. I tell you, I moved that up. I had it on week 5, but I moved it up because in our area, we are seeing signs of nectar coming in already. Mind blown, right? It's only the 1st of April. So I don't know what we're going to have for honey production, but we're excited. So I went ahead and moved that up to week 3 for those of y'all that are experiencing what we are. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about it in a minute. And that video is going to be when and how to add honey supers. And just so you know, that'll be coming out the week of the 14th. On week 4, simple splits. We love this. We love this article. We've redone this several times. It's too easy to not keep going with this. And then the 3-minute split video to go with it. Week 5, you're going to start seeing small hive beetles. So we wanted to pull that in and talk about that again. And then I really just kind of felt like we needed to also talk about the most important aspects of beekeeping. And that's why I threw that video in there. So that's your lineup. And just to point out, week 4 is the week of the 21st, and week 5 is the week of the 28th. So I know it's a long April, isn't it? So anyway, all right, Blake, slide that slide. All right, so I happen to kind of be partial to this article. I wrote this, and that doesn't mean that I think it's better than anything else that we do, but it's my second favorite topic. I love bee biology. Those that know me know that I love bee biology. But maximizing honey production is a topic that James and I have taught on for years. And this article, I will say, if I do say myself, read it. When it comes out on the week of the 14th, I think you're really going to like it. So let's kind of go over a few things, points to make in this article. Nature's provisions are where you should start. That couldn't be a truer statement. I actually laid it out of what you should be looking for. Nectar producing plants in bloom. I think that's a no-brainer. We all know that. A healthy population. Again, a no-brainer. Frames with 80% drawn comb. Virtually no empty frames, because if you've got empty frames, they're going to fill that first before they fill upstairs. White wax. If we see white wax happening, we've got nectar flow coming in. And then, of course, nectar being stored into the cells. That's obvious, right? Number 2, unhealthy bees. Unhealthy bees, not only will your hive not be a good honey producer, but you're going to see everything fall apart. We drill that into your heads every single month with an article of either it's varroa or it can even be small hive beetles. But we have got to maintain healthy bees because we're not going to get honey production. And that's all year long, not just now. But I go into rather deep detail in the article about that and how important and some of the things you have to look for there. Number 3, you have options when to requeen. And you really probably didn't expect to see that in this article, but I kind of became a big fan of a man by the name of Morris Ostrowski years ago. And he wrote an article, and here it is, Managing Honeybee Population for Greater Honey Yield. I love that article, and we've used it multiple times and pulled little aspects, components out of it. And one of the things that he believes, and we're kind of on his page, not every year, but some years, is to requeen in the fall and not the spring. So sometimes if your hive works best to wait, then this article will give you some options and talk about how important that is and how you can get by with waiting. Number 4 there, how you super can affect your rate of production. Absolutely the most cool aspect on different ways you can super to increase your honey production. And I go through the methods of supering, whether that's top or bottom supering, and I go into great detail about that. Frame spacing. alignment when you're stacking your supers one on top of the other. If you get them off balance, I don't want to spoil the article, but there's logic to that. The super frame shuffle, yes, that does sound like a Chari statement all over, doesn't it? Bees tend to fill center frames first. So if they do and they start, they're too slow to start filling the outer frames, just move them around. The bees they'll catch back up. That gets them all kind of drawn out equally and at the same time. Queen excluders and their impact, adding supers with undrowned foundation. I talk about that and when to add more. And very last, supering is not a contest. Although James Elam seems to think it is. Sometimes it's like, how many can we get on one hive? It's all right. Work within the natural rhythms of your bees. The takeaway from that is let nature be your guide, and supering isn't a contest, but some of us it is. That's okay. All right. That's what I got, y'all. Let's get Bob Binnie going. Hi, Bob, if you can see me.
All
I
right.
can see, I can see
Thank
you. Good evening.
Thank you, Chari. Well, we'll jump to Bob in just a second. So we're almost there. Sorry. I know that's what we're all waiting for. Um, just to wrap up, a couple quick things before we
Yeah.
get to the main event of the evening. Um, California is about done, so this is my crew and their final days in California. The almond pollination is over, so the bees are all home. Crews are for the most part home, and that epic journey is done. This is an old picture. This was weeks ago. This was right when the petals start to fall off of the almond orchards in California, where the bees were pollinating. You can see it just looks like beautiful snow. It's incredible when those petals start to fall. This is the parting shot. This is one of our holding yards in California, right in the foothills. And everything turns green for about a month and a half, and then it all turns brown. So beautiful shot of some bees headed out right before everything start turning brown. Now we're all focused on making nooks. So we're splitting like crazy. We're building nooks to sell. We're making splits. Our crews are working absolutely nonstop. This time of year is probably the busiest time of year. I mean, April, late March, early April is 24/7 more or less, to get bees split and get them ready for the upcoming honey crops. I love this video. This is some queen cells hatching out in an incubator. We had some extra queen cells and didn't have a hive to put them in. And so got this super cool video of a virgin queen hatching out of her queen cell. So we see a lot of that this time of year, especially when we have really rainy days like we've had a lot of this past week. Sometimes we end up with extra queen cells because we weren't able to get out and make splits because it was too wet. And so sometimes we end up with some extra queen cells. But anyway, love that video. Another couple quick updates. The bee collapse. I've been trying to keep you guys updated and informed on what's going on there. We've
Hmm.
a new report came out today from Project Apis M. They have now surveyed they've surveyed enough beekeepers that their survey now represents 72% of all beehives in the US. So they've and the newest survey shows 1.6 million hives lost, which is quite a bit worse than the original survey, which showed, I think, 1.1 million hives lost. So the loss is severe. And I will say, if we're looking for some good news, is that beekeepers are working really hard to overcome those losses. I mean, we're splitting like crazy, and beekeepers are doing their absolute best to recover. They're doing some things like buying package bees because they're cheaper. They can't afford to buy full colonies, so they're buying packages, trying to rebuild. So beekeepers are incredibly resilient. I have no doubt as an industry that we'll come through this, but we have not received any aid as an industry from the USDA, no financial aid. And that's really, 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 really harmful for beekeepers. So please keep reaching out to your legislators, local, state, and national, and let them know, number one, that this is a crisis, and number two, that beekeepers really need help because no help has been received yet. So keep spreading the word. That's the best thing you can do right now. Couple current conditions, what we're seeing right now, and before we jump in with Bob here, is I like to show this map that we created just to remind you of when significant pollen flows start in your region. Most of the US is seeing a decent pollen flow at this point. Some of those far northern regions, you don't have much of a pollen flow yet, but for most of the country, you've got a pretty good pollen flow. And this is the National Leaf Index as of today. So this is a map that shows the leaf out of plants in the United States. The darker red, the earlier it is, the darker the blue, the later it is. So you can see it's a very interesting year. We have these bands of far south is really late, kind of central south is on time to early. And then we've got that blue band where it's late again. And then further north, it's really early. So very interesting spring, a very layered approach to when plants are leafing out. And this is a bloom index, which is similar. I would say the leaf index is more synonymous with a pollen flow. And the bloom index is a little more synonymous with a nectar trickle. I wouldn't say the primary nectar flow, but I would say it represents, when you might have a trickle of nectar. So, of course, this is from the National Phenology Network, so you can Google that at any time and watch these maps. They're updated every single day. Okay, so with that main event, Bob, are you there, Bob?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Wonderful. I sure can. Let's see. We can't see you. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Uh,
Now we can. Wonderful to see you,
okay.
Bob. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
It's
Yeah, those were interesting slides you just showed. That was fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, we rushed through it to get to this slide, which we're all so excited about. Um, really appreciate you joining us and especially in early April. I know that is an incredibly inconvenient time to uh, jump on calls because I'm sure you guys are swamped.
Well, it's fine because my day's over and I'm a little tired. So if I seem a little tongue-tied, forgive me. As you mentioned, working quite hard, making splits, trying to stay ahead of the swarm line. Our outfit, we're fortunate in that our outfit is not all the same. We have yards that are lower elevations and south of our shop, and they start about 2 weeks earlier than the yards that are higher elevation and north of our shops. So thank goodness we have that benefit. I would not want to try to pull everything off at the same time. I don't know how it is in Texas there. I'm going to guess in your location, it's probably all about the same time all around you, huh?
It really is, Bob. I mean, we've got, a 10-day to 2 week window. And by the end of that 2 weeks, every yard we go into, there's a dozen swarms hanging in
Oh,
breed.
yeah. Yeah, that makes your heart kind of go flat. We're staying just ahead of it. We've only seen two swarms so far, and they were kind of our fault. We overwinter in singles. Half of our outfit is singles, and the other half is double deeps. And the singles are tricky if you don't get there in a timely fashion. That's where we see most of our swarm cells. It's actually one of the reasons I prefer double deeps is because they're so much more forgiving.
Right,
They don't starve as easily and they don't swarm as easily.
right.
And our double deeps in our neighborhood, we get them quite heavy. And I like to tell people if it doesn't feel like a box of bricks going into fall, you're not done feeding. And because of that, all of our double deeps still have lots of food in them, but our singles, it's like a race to swarm or starve first.
Right.
You don't know which is going to happen first. So we
Yeah,
got, and then I like feeding sucrose syrup, which is quite stimulating, and it's also stimulating for swarms too.
right.
That's one difference between high fructose and sucrose is if you don't want to stimulate the bees to swarm early, that's one benefit of using high fructose corn syrup. I don't care for high fructose corn syrup for other reasons, but that is one of the benefits of that.
Yeah,
So we're all about sucrose syrup. And then, of course, if you feed thicker syrup, that's less stimulating. A lot of people know this, that if you feed 2 to 1 in the spring, you'll do a lot less stimulation and a lot more weight gaining. Right now, we're feeding 1 to 1, trying to kind of walk that line between stimulating the bees but still gaining weight. When I'm trying to build bees, just simply build brood and build comb, we use very thin sucrose syrup, probably 1.5 parts water to 1 part sugar. And I know that you can draw comb and build bees on high fructose corn syrup, but if that's what you're up to, sucrose syrup works a lot better. You just got to deal with the that swarm thing. If you're
Right.
splitting hard enough, of course, it's not a problem. We're splitting our colonies quite hard right now. We're taking our brood nest down to 2 frames of brood.
Wow.
And of course, that means maybe 3 or 4 frames of bees. And with that, and they're also remaining double deep colonies. So I expect very little swarming out of those colonies that have had that done to them. Our honey flow in our southern locations is probably about 2 to 3 weeks away. And in our northern locations that are higher elevation, maybe 4 to 5 weeks away. So having that upper box completely empty with some drawn comb in it really buys you a lot of time. And I don't know how you do things. We do a kind of a little trick. We will cut that brood nest down to 2 frames of brood, maybe three, and fill the bottom box with food and assets, so to speak. And then that second box is given to them to allow the queen to have her way with that over the next 3 to 4 weeks to get us through the swarm season. And then once the honey flow is started in earnest, we will chase the queen down to the bottom box, put a queen excluder in, allow that second box to hatch out and backfill with honey. And that really works. It works quite well, actually, because that second deep actually turns into a honey super at that point. And yeah, there's been a little brood reared in it, and the comb, isn't white virgin comb like your supers might be, but boy, it's a good way to keep them from swarming and then create a lot of honey at the same time. I'm not trying to promote myself, but I have a video on that very subject. It's called The Trouble with Singles. And I get into why they starve and
Yeah.
swarm and all that. And it's kind of a misleading title because really what it's about is us adding that second deep box to keep them from swarming until the honey flow gets started.
Mm.
And something that I learned a long time ago, and Blake, I'm sure you know this, the old man that helped me get started back in 1981, as a matter of fact, told me this, and I learned that he was absolutely correct. If a colony peaks in population before the major honey flow starts, there's a really good chance they're going to prepare to swarm. But if you can, by splitting or whatever measures you choose to use, if you can make them peak in population after the honey flow has begun and they have plenty of space, many times they will just settle into making honey and they'll forget about swarming completely. But you've got to get them to that point. And if you got a congested brood nest, especially if you're running singles with an excluder, it's almost like a recipe for swarming. So I feel like you got to give them that second box for a while, get them past the swarm impulse time once the honey flow starts. Put the excluder in, get the queen in the bottom box, and they'll just settle in and make honey and completely forget about swarming. That's a technique we use a lot.
Yeah. Wow, Bob, that's an incredible, concise summary of spring management. I think you just summed it up completely. I have a lot of questions about all of that. And so
Stump Blake, okay.
let's jump into that in just a second. First, some folks did send in some questions to try to see if they could stump you and I, and see if they could send in problems that you and I couldn't answer. So I want to get to some of those and see what your insight on them is. And then I really would like to dig in with you a little bit more on splits, feeding, requeening, because I love some of the methods that you just mentioned. So the first question that someone sent in, and I love this one. They said they discovered they have two queens living in their hive, and this was from a nook they purchased last spring. Both queens were marked, and they've presumably been in this hive for months. So they sent a video, and so in the video you can see they've got one marked queen on that side, and they flipped and there's another marked queen. And so they didn't ever add a queen, so they knew it was from last year. So two marked queens that overwintered, spent the whole year together. Why does that happen, Bob? How
Well,
common?
in most cases, it's a mother-daughter. It's not sister queens. It's usually a mother-daughter. And I believe, and I can't prove it, it's just kind of casual observation and a bit of a guess, but I think sometimes they'll put in a supersedure cell and that virgin will hatch out and get mated and come back, but the older queen persists for some time. We see it, I see it in the spring more than I see it later in summer. At some point, I think that older queen tends to disappear. Now, in this instance, it's very interesting that both queens have been marked. Sometimes I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when we're making splits, we'll find the queen and we're satisfied. We set the queen in a box aside and then split the rest of the colony thinking we're done
Yeah,
and not knowing that there's actually two queens in there.
right.
Sometimes we're actually putting a queen in the split, even though we saw the original queen. And so that can be a problem too. I'm not sure about how often two sisters get along. I really don't know. Maybe there's some research somewhere, but I think in most cases it's a mother-daughter. I really
Yeah.
do.
I'm with you, Bob. Yeah, I mean, I see it. It's rare to see, but if you go through a couple hundred beehives in a day, I might see it. So
Yeah.
it happens. But and it's usually a really good hive because you've got two queens laying.
Yes, yes.
Have you ever? I'm just curious. I experimented with it heavily, probably 6 years ago. Have you ever tried running two queen hives, the two queen system?
Absolutely. It works really good, but boy, is it a lot of
It
work.
was so much work.
Yeah. Well, I do it inadvertently. I do it almost by accident. When we run across a double deep colony that is swarmed, we take a double screen board and slide it in the middle with brood and cells up above and brood and cells below. Many of the new beekeepers listening may not realize that the odds of successfully requeening when a colony swarms are not 100%. It's not even close. Maybe 75, in a good time, maybe 80 or 85, in a poor time,
Right.
maybe 60 or 65. So I like to split that colony in half with a double screen board and give both halves a chance to mate. And if one half fails, you just pull the screen board out, sprinkle a little sugar syrup, and add them back together. And of course, if both halves mate, now you've just created another colony. If you don't have another place in the yard to set that thing off on, a lot of times I'll put an excluder on the bottom box with that new queen, put a few supers in the middle, then put another excluder and put the second queen above the second excluder, and then crack the lid in such a way that the upper box has a an entrance to come and go, which is especially important if there's any drone brood at all, because those drones will not go through an excluder and go down through the colony. And it's a lot of work, but if you're willing to do the work, you can make at least double the honey crop, interestingly enough. Oh, beehives are much like a carpentry crew. I think that you get one person doing a certain amount of work, and if you get two, it seems like maybe you get two and a half times as much work done. And you would notice that especially because you have these large crews. I'm guessing that you get five or six people working together, and sometimes they get more than five times more work done. And
Right.
I think a beehive's the same way. The bigger it gets, the more efficient it is, the more bees there are. If you double your bee population, you don't double your production. It's like maybe two and a half times or three times
Right.
more.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. It'd be fun. I've not seen someone present on doing a two queen system, but it would be a fun presentation. It'd be a fun 45-minute presentation teaching
Ah,
how to do
yeah.
a two queen system. Uh,
Okay. Well, light bulb moment. We need to do that, Blake.
I agree. I agree. That'd be a fun one. Maybe the Bee Expo next year.
Hmm,
Okay, so let's see. The
idea.
next person asked, so they had a hive that was thriving and doing well, and they went and checked on them, and they saw a lot of activity. But now it's dead, and they said the survivors appear to have fled and taken their pollen and honey stores with them. Uh, and now there's a lot of robbing, and so they're just trying to understand what happened, why did this hive die, and then they sent a bunch of pictures. So they sent a number of pictures here that are of their dead hive. So, Bob, when you have someone come to you and say, "Hey, I lost my hive. Why did I lose my hive?" What do you what checklist do you go through with them to try to help them understand what may have happened?
Yeah, it's a tough question because you got to be so careful that you don't really hurt somebody's feelings or insult them, honestly.
Right. Right.
Uh, in most cases, when you hear a question like that, and forgive me, this sounds a little condescending, and I don't mean that at all, but in most cases, when you run across those kinds of questions, it's of course somebody that's brand new and they think their bees left, but in most cases, they didn't leave. They died or, slowly, you know, dwindled away through attrition. And it could, my first question, honestly, is mites. Have you treated for mites? And then second question, if they say, yes, I treated for mites, is when did you treat for mites? And it's very interesting how many people will say they're very confident in their mite suppression program because they treated in the fall, but it's really important to treat at the right time. I don't know about your neighborhood. I think, of course, you're earlier than we are. But in our neighborhood, we need to treat around the 1st of August if we can, because we need to clear the mites off of the bees before they start rearing winter bees. If, for instance, in our neighborhood, if you treat for mites in mid-September into October, you've made a huge mistake because any of the viruses that are associated with even a small mite load have already got a foothold. And when you can clear off every mite in the colony in October, but those viruses don't go away for 4, 5, 6 weeks. So it's very important that you clean up the bees that are going to rear the winter bees. Don't wait and clean up the winter bees, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I usually tell folks is you need to treat as soon as you harvest honey. And so
Yeah,
in a lot of in our areas of the South, that's as early as the 4th of July. And
well,
so
yeah.
the sooner you can treat after the honey harvest, the better. But I'm with you, Bob. My first comment is always, yeah, when did you treat? What did you treat with?
Yeah.
And,
And did you check afterwards to
yes,
make sure it worked?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I usually ask about feed. Did how much food did they have going into winter? How much food do they have? This hive doesn't have a lot of food stores, but
Yeah.
it's probably robbed out as well.
Well, this picture in the upper right corner is typical of a colony that is starved because the
Right,
bees all have their heads in the cells. They're facing into the cell. That's often a sign that the colony just completely ran out of food.
right, exactly, exactly. So yeah, varroa mites and food. I mean, that's two of the
Yeah.
biggest things that I usually see. All right, last question we have here that was sent in ahead of time. Someone has a hive. All their hives have a deep box with a medium super on top, and they notice that one of their hives has no brood in the deep box. The deep box is completely full of nectar. They found a marked queen in the medium super, however, and there are 3 to 4 frames of brood in the medium super. So why are they storing nectar only in the deep box? Is there anything they should do to fix this? So basically, all the bees and brood are all in the medium box, nothing but nectar in the deep box. What should they do? And the medium box is on top. So bees have all moved up to the very top box and nothing in the bottom.
I would suggest that this is just an idea. I don't know for sure, but I would suggest that the colony actually became somewhat empty in the bottom and the bees moved up into the second box and began rearing brood. Then the nectar started to come in, but because there was so much brood and other stuff in the top box, there was no space. So they went ahead and stored it in the bottom.
Completely agree. And would you reverse those boxes, Bob, or
I
would you
would
just leave them alone?
if I would be tempted to reverse them, absolutely. If the bottom board isn't nailed on, reversing would probably be a good thing. And if you don't like that configuration later in the season during the honey flow, if you're running an excluder, you can reverse them back and let the bees spend the late spring and summer sorting it out.
Yeah,
I saw that picture of your semi truck. You do something that I used to do when I used to move bees to California a lot, and that is I ran a deep and a shallow, and I actually ran the shallow on the bottom. And I saw a picture on that semi truck showed a couple colonies with the medium on the bottom. And I really kind of liked that because it gave you all the assets you needed for making nukes and splits in the top box, everything you wanted, food, brood, pollen, hopefully. It was right there in the top box. So it's interesting that you're doing something that I used to do. Plus, I used to like to run a deep and a shallow so I could get 4 pallets on a semi truck instead of three.
Exactly. Yeah, it saves a lot on shipping. I find
Yeah,
that it seems like when the bees have extra space, like a medium or a shallow on the bottom, they don't seem to swarm quite as much. Something about having the
yeah.
empty space underneath them seemed
Yeah.
to slow down swarming, and then feeding was a whole lot easier because your feeder's in the top box right under.
Heaters in the top box, yeah, everything's there. And you're right, that extra cluster space in the bottom is important. Even a rim on top can accomplish the same thing a little bit in a different way. People ask me why I have rims on right now on some of my colonies, and quite honestly, we've gotten to some colonies that if they wouldn't have the rim on top, they probably would have already been building swarm cells. Of
Yeah.
course, they made a mess up there. They
Right.
made a lot of drone bird comb, but
Yeah.
if they wouldn't have had that space, I might have ran into trouble. It's
Right.
kind of the same concept, but in a different way. Little extra cluster space, space to work. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. Let's talk about splitting again for a minute, if you don't mind. So,
Sure.
can you, for someone that is a small scale beekeeper, um, who maybe isn't really experienced with splits, let's say this is their first year splitting their 2-year-old hive, and they want to make a honey crop. How many let's talk a little bit about how many frames of brood you put in each split, because you mentioned you just put 2 frames of brood, which was surprising to me. How far away is your honey crop, and can you make a honey crop with just putting 2 frames of brood into a split?
Well, there's actually more to that story. You didn't get all the information. Many of these splits are being put over a double screen board on top of the colony, which means that in from the split, all the field force goes home. When we come back the next day, that 2 frames of brood is like 6 or 7 or 8 frames of bees. Well, in 3 weeks, that box is covered up with brood because all of those bees allow the queen to expand very rapidly. And it's not just 2 frames of brood, it's like a lot of bees too. And she'll
Gotcha.
lay
Okay.
and that's why we like that extra drawn comb in the bottom box because I don't know exactly how long it takes her to fill that all up, but it's not long.
Right.
And so all of those bees start hatching off 3 weeks later. And if our honey flow is 4 or 5 weeks away, that 2 frames of brood, back to my concept of not letting the colony peak before the honey flow starts, trying to trick it into peaking afterwards. And now, intuitively, people would say, well, wait a minute, let's back up here. You want your colony to be as strong as possible in order to make a good honey crop. But unless you're doing some alternative technique like checkerboarding, reversing boxes, there's demery, there's all these methods to deal with, a colony that's peaking and moving the brood out of the brood nest and giving the queen a lay space to lay. Unless you're doing something like that and your colony builds too soon, you're going to have so many swarming issues that if you split the yard down to keep it from peaking too soon, even though the best colonies might not make as much honey as the best colony that didn't swarm if you didn't split, the overall yard average is going to be greater if that makes sense. If you have 10 colonies in your yard and 5 of them swarm, what do you got? The best ones might have made 200 pounds, whereas if you split, they might have only made 120. But, I look at I look at the yard, as a whole, rather than a single colony that made the biggest crop you've ever seen. And
Right.
then, of course, in my opinion, I look at that split as a harvest too. That split is an important part of my revenue. So if I take the value of that split and add it on to the fact that I had almost no swarming, suddenly the bottom line looks a lot greater to me.
Hmm.
That's not answering your question. I know I kind of went
Oh
down a
no, that's
rabbit
really good.
hole, but yeah, back to the point at hand is all of that field force that returns to that bottom box will allow the queen to start laying massive amounts of brood right away, and that unit in 4 or 5 weeks is going to look a heck of a lot different.
And so you put your old is it your old queen that stays in that split?
Yeah, no, the old queen stays in the hive below.
Okay.
The mother colony, and let's say it's a double deep, and then we'll put a split in a deep box above the colony and put 3 frames of brood in there and lots of bees, knowing that half of those bees are going to go back home. And of course, they don't need as many bees to maintain that brood because you've got the heat coming through the double screen board. You can actually maintain those 3 frames of brood with probably 50% of the bees that it would have taken if that nuke was just set on the ground in cold weather. Now, that all that having been said, there's going to be more brood than what's going to go in that top box. And that will also go into 5 frame nuke boxes that can be left in the yard or screened and taken away. If those nuke boxes, like we just split some bees today, and we got 3 splits out of every colony and still left 2 frames of brood in the bottom. These double deeps were packed. And we hit it right on time. We were just starting to see eggs in queen cell cups, which is, in my view, perfect timing to split. And the colonies are all full of nutrition. They're so healthy. There's so many young bees hatching. You can take 3 frames of brood and put it in a 5 frame nuke box with a frame of food and an empty comb. And 3 weeks later, if you put a caged queen in there, 3 weeks later, that thing is sitting on go. It's either ready to sell or transfer into a bigger box. And if we choose, and we also made some nukes today to put queen cells in. And in that case, we only use 2 frames of brood, maybe even 1.5, because that's going to be 5 weeks before that thing gets transferred into a bigger box. So we don't want it to get too solid, too full, too
Right.
plugged out.
Right.
So yeah, we were getting 2 to 3
Wow.
splits out of every colony and still leaving 2 or 3 frames of brood in the bottom box today. It felt good.
I
It's
bet that makes the day so much easier and more. I mean,
it does, yeah,
much
when
more fun
everything's
day.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been doing nothing but splitting the last two
Wow.
weeks. I've really, I like making honey, but I believe I like making bees better. I think I prefer to make new bees, new beehives, nukes, and all of that. And we've gotten to I see watching your ads on the screen there. I see you're selling colonies too. I like selling single story colonies. One of the things about this is forgive me, we're going off
No,
subject again.
what is
One
for?
of the things I love about making bees is that I'm constantly rotating my comb. I do not have to throw comb out. And it's not about selling my old junk. It's about making so many splits that you never get any old junk. So we're always, like if we've got some 3-year-old comb and some 1-year-old comb, we put the 3-year-old comb in the split
Right.
and we're not selling gun, but you got to be careful here that people don't misunderstand. We're not selling junk.
Right.
But if you do it properly, you never have to throw a comb
Right.
away.
We do this exact same thing. I have to ask Bob, this is just curiosity. So when you're out splitting bees and you're working a hive, what do you sit on? Are you kneeling down? Are you sitting on the lid? Do you bring a stool out there
Um,
with you?
I stand, if it's a double deep, I stand. If it's a single, I do sit down on I just put a deep super on its side and sit on
Yeah.
that. I
Okay.
can't, I used to stand and lean all day long, but I'm going to be 72 later this year. I just can't, I can't do it all day anymore.
Well,
I've
hey,
got,
even in my 30s, yeah, I carry a deep box, a deep shell with me, and it's a
yeah.
perfect height, perfect seat.
I used to carry a small piece of carpet that I would lay on the ground so I could kneel down on my knees. But after about 8 or 10 years of that, my knees were going bad, so I had to quit that too.
Yeah. Sometimes I wear knee pads. So like when I'm doing
I
check
tried that.
backs, especially when
Yeah,
I'm doing check backs, I'll wear knee
yeah.
pads. And
I tried that, but it just somehow I didn't. It wasn't comfortable for
yeah,
me.
yeah, that's
But I
right.
like to sit, and I work way slower than I used to. 10 or 15 years ago, I really moved along quickly, much like you probably do now, because you're a young whippersnapper there, but Blake, you're so young
Well,
compared
thank
to
you.
me. And I used to work hard and fast, and nowadays my pace is pretty lackadaisical because I can't push myself like that anymore.
Well, I have no doubt that it's quality over quantity. So yeah.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Uh, so thinking about requeening a little bit, I mean, so you making your splits. Your old queen you're putting down in the bottom box with 2 frames of brood. Do you requeen your hives? If you are you only requeening if you see a bad queen? Or is there a point in which you go through and requeen everything? How do you treat requeening?
Well, all of the above, really. A long time ago, I actually knew Steve Tabor. He was a friend of mine, a
Okay.
colorful man. If people that knew him would tell you that he was an interesting character, but he was smart. And one time he was speaking at a beekeeping convention, and somebody asked him, when's the proper time to requeen, and he shrugged and looked at the person like they were stupid, said, "Well, whenever they need a new queen." Which forgive me,
Oh,
that's just a bad joke,
I love
but
that.
I do try to get every single colony requeened every year. I don't always pull it off. There always seems to be 5 or 10 or 15% that we weren't able to get to. And I listened to Charisse that talk about, that one gentleman that said requeen in the fall. And there's pros and cons to all these different times of year to requeen. And what we do is we don't try to wholesale requeen the whole outfit at the same time. We just pick out yards and requeen them when we can. And we keep a notebook showing which yard got requeened and when it got requeened because there's a huge difference in whether it was late summer or early spring requeening. The benefit to requeening in the early spring is it greatly reduces your swarming tendency. A queen from the current calendar year will generally head a colony that will be less likely to try to swarm than a queen from the previous year. Now, if you requeen in the fall, what do you got? You got a queen from the previous year, but you also have a queen that has very low mileage. Look at this thing like a used car that's already got the kinks worked out of it. Brother Adam, in his book Beekeeping at Buckfast Abbey, talked about making late summer queens, overwintering them in a 4-frame nuke box, and then using those queens in the spring to requeen his production colonies. And he said, almost in every case, those were his very best producing colonies the following season. So why would that be? I mean, that doesn't, I mean, why wouldn't a brand new queen do better than one that's, 3 or 4 or 5 months old? And the reason is maturity. It's just like people, the little 16-year-old or 18-year-old boy may have the physical ability to outwork an older person, but maturity, and as long as you're not too mature like I
Yeah.
am, maturity will actually outdistance the young thing. And it's the same with queens. A queen really doesn't hit its stride until it's 2 or 3 months old. And I know that doesn't make sense, but it's actually true. I believe that, after a queen's 2 or 3 months old, she's going to give you her very best production. So there's pros and cons to both late summer requeening and or early spring requeening.
Yeah.
We do it all. We just do what we can when we can. We might run a couple hundred queen mating nukes that we collect queens out of every 3 weeks, and use those queens for requeening with, and then we'll put another cell in there, and the next batch will requeen some other yards, 3 or 4 weeks later, and that's how we approach it.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, we do something similar. I mean, most of our requeening, I would say, occurs between March and June, is when the
Yeah.
majority of requeening occurs, and then after June, we've pretty much wrapped it up for the year. What are your top tips for helping ensure a queen is accepted when you do introduce the queen to the hive?
Well, the most people, what the dates that you just mentioned are conducive to queen acceptance, and
Yeah,
that is if that you can requeen during a nectar flow, your odds of acceptance just went way up. And if you're trying to requeen during a dearth, your odds of acceptance
right.
just went way down. Now, you can actually recreate that situation by feeding, but you got to do it so carefully. It really comes down to bees that are preoccupied with incoming nectar or sugar syrup, um, or they get preoccupied. And gorged bees, in other words, with full bellies, are much more accepting of a new queen than bees that are hungry, a dearth, so to speak. And you can accomplish that, nectar flow situation by feeding. But if you start robbing frenzies, you can forget your queen acceptance. You've got to feed very carefully. No honeybee healthy, none of this stuff with lemongrass oil, nothing that'll start a robbing frenzy. And that's tricky. If I was a smaller beekeeper, the way to accomplish that is to put the feeding on top of the colony and then surround the feeding unit with another empty box so other bees can't get to it. Because even putting a bucket on it or a jar on the top can kind of cause minor problems. So, of course, you or I can't do that. We can't have a you can't have truckloads of empty boxes to cover up your jar or your bucket. Inside feeders can help, but if you're very careful, a gallon and a half feeder inside. You can feed the colony a day or two ahead of killing the queen and putting another one in, get them very gorged, very preoccupied, and then feed them again when you put the new queen in. And then also, we have a little trick that actually seems to help, and that is that we will put a piece of cheap masking tape over the candy and put a little nail prick through the masking tape, and that'll buy you another day, maybe two,
Right.
before the bees can chew through the masking tape. Most candy only takes a day or two for the bees to get through. Some's quicker. If the candy's too soft, you got a problem. And again, if the candy's too hard, you got a problem. So just take your average candy and and you got to use, sounds crazy, but you got to use cheap masking
Yes.
tape. You can't use
Agreed.
the good stuff.
Right.
If you use
Right.
that blue painter's tape, they don't get
Yep.
through it well. And
Yep.
you got to put the nail hole in there so that the bees know that the candy's on the other side, because if you don't have that little nail prick in there, they don't realize there's candy on the other side and they don't try to remove the masking tape at all.
Exactly.
So it's another issue. But that really helps. What percentage does it help? In less than ideal conditions, it might buy you another 10 or 15 or 20% of acceptance. So that's a trick we use.
Yeah.
If you're really desperate, it doesn't sound just as screwy as can be, but if you can lose the field force somehow, your acceptance will go up. That technique I just talked about, where you put the nuke above the double screen board in the same yard above the mother colony, all the field force bees went home. Those bees that are upstairs are all very young bees that have never been out of the colony, and they're much more accepting of a new queen.
Yeah. And that's one point I was going to make, Bob. I mean, I completely agree with all your points on feeding and the tape. We do that too. Um, I find that the smaller the colony is, the more readily they are going to accept the queen. So if you're trying to requeen a big double deep pack full of
Yeah.
bees, it is almost impossible.
It's tough, yeah. That might be an occasion where you want to make a split, get the split to accept the queen, and then use the split to requeen with later. And that double screen board method actually is a good trick for that. Actually, the double screen making the nuke over the double screen, if you let that top box, build up to, 6, 7, 8 frames of bees, and just pull out that double screen board, even if you don't remove the queen in the bottom, the odds are that the upper queen will take over the colony. If you got a substantial box up there over that double screen board, they will take care of their queen, and they're going to go down through the colony to get out. And in many cases, you don't have to find the old queen at all. Of course, you're playing a gamble. Sometimes the old queen is the one that survives, but it's just there's lots of stuff. Steve Tabor again did a study long time ago where he just put queen cells in cell protectors in honey supers. And during a nectar flow, if you put a queen cell in a cell protector in your top honey supers, he found, as long as there's no queen excluder now, he found that in some cases he had as great as 70% requeen success. Sounds crazy, but
Yeah.
that's what he said. Yeah.
I tried that once after reading
Did
that
you?
report. I did try it and I didn't get up to 75, but it was 50 to 60% that
Oh, really?
it worked and
I
pretty
tried it. I tried it once with disastrous results, but there was a reason. We get a lot of rain here. We get a lot of bad weather, potentially in May or June. We never know. And so after talking to Steve about that, I tried it in May, which is pretty safe for queen mating. Lots of drones, everything's good. And I put those queen cells in the supers, and it rained for 3 weeks straight. And
Mm.
what happened was, I'm guessing what happened. They all came up queenless. I think the virgin queens went down, killed the queen, and then never got out to mate. And I ended up with a bunch of queenless
Oh
colonies.
no. That's a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I hate it when that happens. Yeah, I'm a little worried about that right now, just because it's been so rainy for us here in Texas the past, 7 days or so. And fortunately, there are some clear days between the rainy days for the queens to get out and mate. But I always get
Oh,
so nervous this time of year when you have just long periods of chilly, rainy weather, um, and that mating success certainly drops. Uh, what about finding queens? That's such a challenge for small scale beekeeper. Well, for all of us, really. I mean,
yeah.
any tips and tricks on finding queens?
Well, I have a tip for newer beekeepers that are either intimidated by the idea of finding a queen or just simply can't get it done.
Mm.
And we actually do this ourselves sometimes if we, depending on what the weather's doing. And we know, for instance, we may know that we got a batch of queens coming from a queen producer, somebody like you, on Thursday, but it's going to rain all day, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning. We go, there's no way we can make, you know, 200 or 300 nukes before the weekend. So we'll go in early. And what we do is we create the bottom box with the amount of brood we want to leave behind, and everything else, we watch for the queen as we pull it out. And if we don't see her, we shake the bees off of those frames into the bottom box. And if we've never saw the queen, then we've shaken a whole bunch of frames, of course. If we
Right.
found the queen, then shaking stops because she's in the bottom. And then we will take a queen excluder and put over the brood nest, and then put a third box or second, depending on the scenario, full of all these assets that we shook the bees off into an upper box over a queen excluder. And when you come back the next day, you've got a box full of brood and bees and honey, and you know the queen's not there because she's below the queen excluder. That's a really good technique for new beekeepers that don't want to try to find the queen. And honestly, we use it a lot ourselves because we see a bunch of queens coming in later in the week. We'll go out on a Monday or something and put all a bunch of assets above a queen excluder, and then and come back on Thursday with a bunch of nuke boxes, and we can make a bunch of nuke boxes really fast if we know we don't have to look for the queen.
Yeah, we do the same thing, and then if you do need to requeen, you know where the queen is, and it's a much smaller box of bees now in the
That's right.
bottom
Yeah.
there if you need to
Yeah.
find her. Yeah, love that, love that. Um, Oops, sorry. Let's talk about swarm. You talked a lot about swarms already. And so this is perfect. Um, when you are working to prevent swarms, and you find a hive that already has cap swarm cells like you see in the picture here, what do you do? Let's say they haven't swarmed yet. So, I mean, usually they swarm about the time those cells are capped. But let's say you still see the queen and there's eggs, but they're already far enough along that you've got capped queen cells. What do you do at that point?
Well, this may not be the answer you're hoping for, but we split that thing to pieces.
No, that's what I was hoping for.
And in many cases, we even kill the old queen and just say, okay, this box is getting requeened right now. And we'll leave a frame with, first of all, if I see a frame like that, I'm only going to leave the two best cells behind if it's springtime, because if you get a colony and let's say you kill the queen and leave a dozen cells in there, if it's got a lot of bees in there in the early spring, like right now, sometimes that colony is very optimistic, and the first virgin that hatches will swarm. The colony will swarm with a virgin. And then even sometimes the second or third one that had, sometimes the colony will swarm itself almost to death. But for some reason, if you, first of all, I could leave just one, of course, and then that ends that problem right there. But we both know that not every cell, I don't know what's the
Yeah,
percentage. You'd like to think that they're all perfect, but they're not.
no.
But when I do that with two cells, I rarely see that virgin queen swarm business or after, so whatever you want to call it. So
Mm.
two cells works for me. I'll just leave two cells behind with maybe a couple frames of brood in the original mother colony, and I'll take the rest and just split it to pieces and back to dollar and cents. I consider that a harvest too.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. And I've found that that's the only way to shut down that swarm impulse is to split them to pieces.
Yeah.
Trying to wipe out all the cells or anything like that usually doesn't shut down that swarm impulse, like just splitting them apart. Yeah.
There is another trick that we do. If this colony is pretty far along, if you can catch it before the cells are sealed, you can rake out all the cells and then move the colony to another location so that it loses its entire field force and it goes into shock for a week and a half and it'll stop rearing queen cells. Of course, eventually it's going to get repopulated again and start all over again. But just moving the colony sometimes can quit that. And then if you have colonies next door, they're going to get all that field force. So suddenly they're going to be a lot bigger. And I mean, depending on the circumstance, it could be a win-win-win.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah, this video is a classic video of a hive swarming. That's the problem with singles. That's a single story hive. It's swarming. Um, it's an incredible sight. It's also a little heartbreaking. It's like dollar
Yeah.
bills flying out of the hive. Once once you find a hive that has already swarmed, what do you do? Anything?
Yeah.
They've got a lot of brood, but the
Yeah, do the same thing. I split it up. And if I don't have nuke boxes, we do carry these double screen boards on the truck with us
okay,
during the active swarming season because if we run across a double deep colony that is swarmed, we'll at the very least split it in two with a double screen board.
okay. So you'll still go ahead and make the split even if it's already swarmed, and then
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, presumably, if it has swarmed, the weather is no longer frigid. It
yeah,
might be a little cool at night. And also, when they swarm, sealed brood can take a little more, how do I say this, less than desirable weather conditions than a box full of larvae and eggs and everything. Especially if sealed brood is far along and ready to hatch, they almost create their own heat, honestly.
right, right, absolutely. Any other tips before we move on from swarms for small scale beekeepers on on swarm prevention? A common question I get is, "Hey, I can't get queens yet." So say it's mid-March, I can't get queens till mid-April, and my hive is already full of bees. What do
Yeah.
I do to prevent this hive from swarming?
Well, checkerboarding works. That's a lot of work, and you need drawn comb to do it with. If you checkerboard with foundation, it does not have the same effect. And checkerboarding meaning, splitting brood apart a little bit and adding a drawn comb in between other frames of brood. And of course, you got to be careful with that too. If the nights are still cold, you can actually kill a bunch of brood. But if it's warm enough, you can checkerboard and it kind of pressures the colony a bit and they won't swarm. I have a couple of friends that do nothing but checkerboard, make massive crops of honey, and that works. And this is going to sound a little weird, but sometimes just creating excessive ventilation can help. Like we'll crack the lid, we'll take the top box or the top super, push it back 3/4 of an inch, and create an entire new 3/8 of an inch entrance between supers. Crack the lid, create that crack between supers, and that's not a silver bullet, but if you just do that alone, you will notice a noticeable difference in swarming.
Okay. I
Ex- Excessive excessive ventilation.
I've never heard that. That is interesting. I've never heard that before.
It doesn't cure it, but if
Yeah.
you do that across the board, you might notice like a 10 or a 15% benefit from it.
Interesting.
Give them a lot of entrances to
Yeah.
protect.
Yeah. That's a good point. Um, all right. So, this was a picture I
Oh,
uh of a swarm, and it was a queen. Not many people clip the wings of queens anymore. But I had a gentleman that said, "Well, I'm going to clip the queen's wings so they won't swarm." And the queen literally they
yeah.
crawled. The swarm didn't fly out; they crawled out with the old queen. Um, so she couldn't
Yeah.
fly, but she could crawl.
Or she flew a foot or two and dropped in the
Yes.
ground. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they
Oh, that's
all
true. Yeah.
went right along with her. Um, let's see. So adding a box, adding super. So when do you add your second deep box if it's for brood, or when do you add your first supers? What are you watching for in order to add another box?
Well, for me, it's a two-prong answer. Like I just explained today, that we left 2 or 3 frames of brood in our bottom box and added another box right then and there because I won't be back there for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's that approach. I see here it's listed anytime the box is 80% full, it's time to add another box. If you know that nectar is going to come in and continue coming in for at least several weeks, I'd say more like 60 or 70%, add the next box. Of course, they're going to work their way up through the center, not out if you do that,
Right.
especially if it's drawn comb. But that's huge for helping with the swarming impulse. And if you get past the swarm, that 3 or 4 week, it's really 2 or 3 weeks for us, you can get past that window where they're really wanting to swarm and allow them, don't keep stacking boxes up. Now they'll start going sideways and start filling out to the walls. And I'm really kind of guilty of wanting my supers sort of full. I don't like harvesting a bunch of half full supers. And
Either.
if the honey flow's half over and they still got a bunch of empty frames, I'll just let them plug out. Well, plug out, maybe that's the wrong term. Continue to fill up to the side the boxes they've already got.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the exact same. Let me see what else I've got here. Let's touch this one really quickly. We've got about 10 minutes left here. Chalk brood, European foul brood, all the snotty brood, everything you can see in a cold, wet spring. Do you do anything to prevent or treat all these foul broods? Do you not usually see them?
Well, I haven't seen chalkbrood in a very long time, but I've had it big time in the past. And when I had chalkbrood, I was able to zero in on the idea that it was the genetics, honestly. And I won't mention names, but several times I would buy queens from a southern producer somewhere and just watch the chalkbrood develop. Whereas queens from another producer, I would see none.
Interesting.
So that kind of led me to believe that genetics can have a part to play in that. Of course, moisture, cool, shade, down, hive sitting on the ground, all of that stuff can really have a play in this whole thing. But honestly, if I see a colony that's ridden with chalk brood, I want to kill the queen and try another queen
Yeah.
first thing,
Yeah.
and then of course get them dried up somehow if they're moist. Perhaps an upper ventilation hole somehow. Just try to get them dried up. And I had a problem with it for a while. I really did, and I really zeroed in on the fact of it was the bees I was getting from a couple of producers.
Mm.
That's a terrible scene. I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's awful. What about European foul brood? Do you do anything for it? Do you just let the warmer weather take care of it?
Well, there's several things you can do. I used to use terramycin. I grew up in beekeeping in the era when it was just understood that you 2 treatments with terramycin in the spring and 2 in the fall, and just everybody did it, so I did it. And
Yeah.
I did that for 40 years, really, truly.
Mm.
And of course, now in Georgia, we're seeing a problem with that because we're starting to see resistance
Mm.
terramycin big time. Not only that, some guys down in North Florida and South Georgia are seeing EFB that's resistant to lincomycin. Am I saying that
Really?
properly?
Yeah.
And tylosin and all these other
Wow.
things.
Wow. Mm.
Nothing's stopping it. And that's why people are trying probiotics and all that stuff. I had a little bit of European foul brood going on for 3 years ago, and it came in on some queens. I'm absolutely convinced. I had zero European foul brood, and I got 100 queens from a guy down in Florida. And the yards I put them in, I could just see it
Mm.
develop. It came in on the queens. I swear it did, because my other yards had none.
Mm.
And so I'm still dealing, and I actually called him. He's a friend, so I could have a friendly, honest conversation with him. And he was using Tylosin because all of the other antibiotics were no longer working on EFB. So he gave me this EFB that was resistant to all these antibiotics. And I
Oh
had
no.
Jorg Mayer come over from the University of Georgia. He's in charge of the vet school over there.
Yeah.
Very smart man. He's a beekeeper too. He's really trying to teach his vets how to be there for beekeepers.
Yeah.
We need that now because, now you need a prescription for many
Right.
things. So the veterinary uh, community is starting to get a little involved in beekeeping. And he came over and took samples of a couple colonies I had that were just rampant with European foul brood. And he said, Bob, I've never seen, the parts per billion were off the charts. He said, I'd never seen a colony still alive with this
Wow.
many parts per billion of
Wow.
European foul brood. And he said, you've got a strain that's resistant to every antibiotic that he knew of.
Wow.
So
Oh,
I got rid of those colonies in a hurry. I just,
no kidding.
little gasoline, and that was the end of that. And so the problem has gone away in my outfit now. We're doing pretty good, and I don't use anything currently. I'm just trying to just good practices. Every once in a while, we'll see one or two, and I've got one yard that's got four in it right now. I know right where they're at. We're keeping track of them, and I'm requeening them with some different stock, and I want to see if that will clean it up.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to go. This is an interesting fact. These four colonies are in a program, a research program with Dayland.
Mm.
I've got 5 yards that I allow dayland. We put queens in these yards. They're Poline queens,
Yep.
and half of them are vaccinated and half are not. And the four colonies that have European foul brood, half is vaccinated and the other half are not, and they look identical. That's telling me that the vaccine is not helping. Casual observation. I got to be careful here. Might be making somebody mad, but casual observation is telling me that that vaccine does not help with European foul brood.
Yeah.
At least in that case with those two colonies. Now, I have in the past used a concoction that I learned from somebody else, a combination of tea tree oil, camphor, and eucalyptus oil. There it literally is research showing that there's a compound in all three of those essential oils that is effective against European foul brood. And I tried it, though some of those colonies that York came over and tested, they weren't so bad. I tried some blue towels with that recipe, and
Right.
it did kind of clear it up. I mean, it actually worked. And I hesitate to say it's a silver bullet, but that year in that case, it kind of cleared them up.
Interesting.
And I don't know if anybody's interested in that recipe. I have a video that I believe is simply called European Foul Brood or Treating
Okay.
European Foul Brood in my video collection. And
Okay.
it tells that recipe. So I won't get into that too much. That's off-label stuff, so I gotta be careful there.
Bob, so other than varroa mites, I mean, do you use any supplements, treatments, essential oils, anything you put in the feed? Or do you pretty much just, hey, we're focused on varroa mites and sugar syrup, and that's the
Focused on
only
varroa mites. I don't even like feeding pollen supplement because I'm lucky. We have a fall pollen flow. We don't have a lot of goldenrod, but we've got enough to where the bees get some good nutrition before they go into winter. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have that.
Mm.
Um, First of all, in our neighborhood, we if we put a pollen patty in spring, we just invited a whole heck of a lot of hive beetle trouble.
Mm.
So I don't like to use pollen patties for that reason. And I actually don't want to put it in winter. Unlike you, I don't do the California thing
Right.
anymore. I quit that 6 or 8 years ago. I don't need massive colonies in January, so I don't even want massive colonies in January. I just want my little 5, 6, 8 frames of bees that
Yeah.
get by on 2 frames of honey, and then build up in time to split now.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, I don't need pollen supplement like someone like you would. So
Mm.
I don't do that. I have played with probiotics some, and the jury is really out on that. I did read Randy Oliver's little article, and I talked to the University of Florida. They ran a research thing down there, and they're saying it doesn't do anything. But I've talked to other people, and I can't really go into details because it's not published work. But I've talked to other people that absolutely swear it's working, and they're showing some lab reports that say just because it's not increasing the proper gut microbes that are normally in a bee doesn't mean it's not having an effect. So I'm still on the fence about probiotics.
I am too. Yeah, I mean we've experimented with it a lot, we've used it a lot, and I'm very much on the fence. I think that what I've noticed is some years where it's cold and damp, and I might have had a European foul brood problem, it seems to help.
Yeah.
Other years, I don't really notice any difference at all when we do it in half a yard and not the other.
Well, so three people got me started on probiotics. Two were beekeepers, and one was Jord Mayer. They're the man I mentioned at the University of Georgia. He swears by him. He's got all this. He keeps feeding me all these research papers that I don't understand. I don't even know what they're talking about. He says, "This is proof, Bob. This is proof. Trust me."
Yeah.
But I know two big beekeepers. One had about 5,000 colonies, and the other had 4,500. North Dakota, Texas, people like that. And they both gotten to the point where European foulbrood was eating them up and nothing would work. And both independent, they didn't know each other. They both said once they started using probiotics that their European foulbrood didn't completely go away, but it got a heck of a lot better. So
Yeah.
that's kind of field, you
Right,
know, casual field reporting, and then some
right.
there is research that shows probiotics do have an effect. So again, I'm on the fence. Am I using them? Probably. I'm probably going to pour some in,
Yeah,
once a month in
yeah,
the spring here. Yeah.
yeah. No, I'm the exact same way. Well, Bob, we want to be respectful of your time. I know it's April and you've had a long day splitting, and I've learned so much this evening. So I thank you for just being so generous with your time and
Absolutely.
educating
Yeah.
all of us. So I, I'll have to go back and rewatch this one once we put it on YouTube, and I'd really recommend for everybody listening, go check out Bob's YouTube channel. And is it just it's just Bob Binnie, right? We just
If
search
you
Bob
just go to YouTube and type in my name, it comes. Apparently, there aren't any other Bob Binnie beekeepers on YouTube, so it comes
Binnie.
right up.
There's
And I've
it's
got a lot of
one and
videos.
all.
Some of them are good, some of them are boring, but some of them are good. Yeah.
All I've seen are great. So
And if you're going to put this on YouTube, one of these days, I'll put a link to this video at the end of one of mine, and
sure.
that'll help your video get
Well,
promoted
thank you.
good too.
And we'll link to your YouTube channel as well with this video. So
Right,
um,
cool. Well, I enjoyed it, Blake.
thank
I
you so
always
much.
enjoyed talking with
Go
you.
have some dinner and get some sleep, and we get to do it all again tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, Bob. We really
Okay,
appreciate you.
good night, all. Thank you.
Good night. And thank you to everyone else. If you, we appreciate you spending the evening with us, and we will see you all in May. So happy beekeeping, everybody.